I grew up in Central Oregon, and there's a reservation called Warm Springs, about 2 or so hours from where I live. I only mention that because a lot of people in my area have friends there, and a lot of the land in that area belongs to that tribe. When I was a kid, we used to go camping there. Not on the res, of course, but in that area, and I met a lot of kids who grew up there. I got to know one kid really well. His name was Nolan, and we ended up hanging out a lot when our families were in that area. Our folks got to know each other, so we would all get in touch and camp out around the same time. We'd camp out for about 2 weeks, so we were out there for a long time. My dad had an RV though, so I guess it wasn't really camping. But we'd take our tents and stuff and set them out a ways from our camp most nights. I didn't like sleeping in there because I liked being outside. One year Nolan and I were out there. I think we must have been about 12 or so. We wanted to go out and camp near the river because we wanted to try night fishing. I think we must have been about a third of a mile away from the main camp. We were far enough away that we couldn't hear or see anyone else. I clearly remember that. We were messing around most of the day. I don't really remember much about it, but we ended up building a fire at some point, and I was really impressed because he had this flint or something that he used to start it. I'd never seen anyone do that before, so I thought it was pretty cool. I got him to teach me how to do it, and we lit some stuff on fire. Which, looking back on it, was really stupid because it was the middle of fucking summer. And if I remember right, the fire warning was either at yellow or orange. But thankfully we didn't start any major fires. And when it got dark, we sat around and talked about whatever it is that 12-year-olds talk about. I don't really remember. But what I do remember is, at some point during the conversation, Nolan looked over my shoulder at the river and asked me if I could see something. The way our camp was set up, we were about 10 feet from the river, and we were at the widest point, so it was probably about 20 feet to the other bank. It gets hot up there in the summer, but the water's still freezing cold, and the current is extremely powerful, which is very important. I look over my shoulder and I could see something wading into the water on the other side. From where we were at, it looked like a deer, but we couldn't really tell because of the light of the fire. I got up to take a closer look, and I saw a pair of antlers, so I figured it was a buck. But I thought it was weird that it was wading into the water with virtually no difficulty at all. Keep in mind, the current was very strong this season, but it was like as if the water was not there at all, and it was instead floating towards us. And I noticed that it was definitely heading straight for us. I turned and I asked Nolan what he thought we should do, but he was looking at the fire with this weird expression, and then he tells me suddenly to sit down and shut up. So I do so, because I've never seen him act that way before. He's whispering at me to ignore it, and to just keep talking like we were, but I couldn't think of anything to say. He was saying something about an episode of some show, but I could hear the deer coming through the water. So I wasn't really paying any attention. I kept trying to see over my shoulder. But every time I did, he would just sort of hit me on the arm and make me look at him. I wasn't really scared. I remember that. I was just sort of confused. But then I hear the deer come out of the water, and I could make out what it looked like. And I realized it wasn't a deer. Because whatever it was walking on 2 fucking legs. I started to get up. I was super freaked out, but Nolan just yanked me back down and talked louder about this television show. And I could tell he was just as scared as I was, probably even more. He leaned in and poked the fire with a stick, and he whispered that whatever I do, I cannot speak to it. I could see it come closer, and it stood right behind Nolan's back. I was about ready to pee my pants, and I think I'd probably run if I'd been alone. But I didn't want to leave Nolan. So I kept sitting really still and sneaking glances at it. It wasn't really that tall, but the way it carried itself was just wrong. Like its center of balance was really screwed up. I can't really describe it, but it was like it kept shifting too far forward. It just stood there behind Nolan for a long time, and eventually Nolan ran out of things to say. We just kind of sat there for a second. The fire was making its noise, but I could hear this thing talking in a really low voice. I couldn't make out what it was saying, and I leaned forward a tiny bit. And I actually did pee my pants when it leaned forward too. I couldn't see its face, but I saw its eyes. They were cloudy and milky, and if you want to know what they look like, find that scene from Lord of the Rings where Frodo falls in the lake and all the dead people are floating towards him. That's what its eyes looked like. So all I saw were these two white eyes floating above Nolan's head, and the really vague shape of the antlers coming out of its head. I don't know what my face looked like, but at exactly the same time, Nolan and I fucking booked it out of there. And we ran non-stop until we got back to the main camp. My pants were soaked with piss, so I took them off, and as we were running, I threw them into the bushes. We both stopped once we were in front of my dad's RV, and we couldn't see anything chasing us, so we just stood there and caught our breath. I asked him what that thing was, but he said he didn't know. He said his grandpa had only warned him that if anything were ever to come up to him when he was out in the desert, he was never, ever supposed to talk to it, or listen to anything it had to say. I wanted to know if he heard it talking too, and he said the only thing that he was able to understand was, help you. I think we ended up sleeping in the RV with my parents, and the next night we went back and we didn't see anything. Nothing at all.